Good afternoon and welcome to this online webinar today. My name is Laura BATALLA and I'm the Secretary General of the European Parliament Turkey Forum. It's my pleasure to moderate today's discussion on the future of the EU and EU-Turkey relations in the post-pandemic era, organized by ACA Party's office in Brussels. We are happy to see that this event has attracted so much interest, and we not only have a large audience here on Zoom, but also in the different channels which are broadcasting live on Facebook, YouTube, and others. So to start, COVID-19 has impacted our lives in ways in which we could have never imagined. It also caught by surprise many governments, and the responses that were given at the beginning were mostly uncoordinated and insufficient in some cases. 3 months after the pandemic has become global, countries have begun to ease the restrictions. However, while we are starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel, everything still looks very uncertain. The pandemic has delayed the start of the work of the new European Commission in place since last December, and is also putting EU-Turkey relations on hold as a consequence. The main question is, in which way will the response that the EU will give to the pandemic shape the future of the European Union itself, but also the future of EU-Turkey relations? We want to explore today whether this is an opportunity to fix what has not worked in the process of European integration, but also in our relations with Turkey, and in which ways they can be improved. We will try to answer these questions today with a distinguished panel of speakers. We have with us Mr. Cevdet YILMAZ, member of the Turkish Parliament and Deputy Chairman of AKP in charge of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Nacho Sanchez AMOR, European Parliament Turkey Rapporteur, and Mr. Sergey LAGODINSKY, Chair of the Delegation to the EU-Turkey Joint Parliamentary Committee. A warm welcome to you all. Before we start, I would like to remind our audience that they can ask questions in the chat at any time. We only have 1 hour for the whole duration of the event, but we will try our best to incorporate as many questions as time permits. Please remember to state your name and organization when asking your question, so I can introduce you when I read the questions later on. And please specify if the question is addressed to any of the speakers in particular. Thank you. So to start with, I would like to start with Mr. Yilmaz and ask him about the situation in Turkey. This week, Turkey has come out of the confinement and the country is gradually opening up to the world again. Mr. Yilmaz, what has been Turkey's response to this pandemic, and which are the main challenges that you are still facing?
Thank you, Laura. I thank you for this very important event, which I think is very timely. We need to have more dialogue, actually. During the times of COVID-19, the experts are advising us to observe social distancing. But social distancing should not be understood as lack of dialogue or communication. On the contrary, at these challenging times, we need more dialogue, more solidarity, more cooperation, and I hope this meeting will also reflect this spirit. I also like to thank ACA Party Brussels for organizing this very important meeting, and I also greet very distinguished participants, Nacho Sanchez AMOR and Dr. Sergey LAGODINSKY, for participating. So let me summarize what we have experienced in Turkey. First of all, the COVID-19 arrived late in Turkey comparing to many European countries. We were lucky, actually, to have this precious time. This time has given us the chance to better prepare our public agencies as well as general public to the effects of COVID-19, and I believe this was very important. Early action and early measures have given us this chance. I would like to thank our president that has coordinated all this process, and also our Ministry of Health. He was very active, actually. Let me just give you an example. The first case has been confirmed in Turkey in March 11, but long before that, in January 20th, our Ministry of Health has established a scientific committee, and based on their advice, we have taken several measures like restricting some travels to certain countries, etc. So Turkey has taken early measures, and that has given us a precious time to react more swiftly. And that has also given us the chance to benefit from the experience of other countries. I mean, this is a global pandemic, but it has different time scales and effects in different geographies. So this, I mean, it was not simultaneous in every country. So it has given us the chance to benefit from the experience of other countries, and that was also very positive. Let me also underline the fact that not only this emergency management, which was effective in Turkey and which has been also identified in surveys in our population, people have appreciated this good, efficient management. But apart from that, over 18 years of our governance, we have invested a lot in certain infrastructures, and we have seen the benefit of these accumulated investments. I would like to underline 3 critical areas that helped Turkey to better tackle actually this problem. The first one is health infrastructure. The second one is universal social coverage, social security. And the third one is digital infrastructure. These 3 investments over the last 18 years have given us a better chance to confront this challenge actually. For example, over the 18 years, is there a problem?
No, we heard you perfectly.
Okay. Over the 18 years, actually, we have increased our hospital capacities, especially this quality beds and ICU units, etc. I mean, lots of investments have been done through public-private partnerships. We have developed a lot of infrastructure, and we have also increased the number of health staff in Turkey. The budgetary, I mean, share of health has increased over the years. So all these things have helped us a lot in this process. Our health infrastructure have not been affected from this process, and we were lucky for this. The second one is, of course, as I said, the social security. Everybody in Turkey, in one way or another, can benefit from the health services free of charge. And that has also helped us a lot in this process. And nobody has been denied from these services. The third one is digital infrastructure. And we have done distance learning, for example, through our digital infrastructure all over the country. Business and public administrations could use this. People could work from their homes, home offices have been active in this process. And all these could be possible through our infrastructure, digital infrastructure. And I believe our investments over the 18 years have helped us in this process as well. Apart from, I mean, the domestic efforts, we have also been very active internationally. Actually, right from the beginning, we believed that nobody can be saved if everybody is safe in this process. I mean, this is a global issue. So, of course, every country, every nation should do its own responsibilities. But if your neighbors are not successful, your success may not mean much in the long run. Because if in your neighbor the problem continues, it will one way or another come back and affect you in the process. So we need more international cooperation, more solidarity at different levels. That was our understanding. And in that understanding, we have developed bilateral relations, regional relations, and global relations. Bilaterally, 135 countries requested some sort of help from Turkey, and we were able to help more than 80 countries. It is close to 90 countries now, I guess. Today, for example, there is a plane from Turkey to Niger carrying some health equipment and other stuff to help Niger. And we have done this with our European friends, NATO allies, with Balkans, with Central Asia, with Africa, with many countries. We had this bilateral cooperation, and that was very, very important. We were quite successful actually in doing this. Some of our colleagues here criticized us for this actually internally,
They said that you should give priority to Turkish people inside rather than cooperate outside. But we didn't actually follow this route, and we believe we did right actually. And this cooperation should go beyond actually material sharing of material stuff. We should also share experiences actually with different countries, and I believe that is what this process requires. We have also taken regional initiatives, for example, with Turkic states, with Islamic countries, with our geography, close geography, and with Europe, of course. We had certain contacts and cooperations in this process. At the global level, we have supported EU initiative for a global vaccine, actually. President Erdogan himself participated in this initiative and declared strong support of Turkey to this initiative. We believe that it should be free of charge or with very little cost to all the world, and that will be a test for our new stage of globalization, probably after this after this pandemic. And I believe we should continue to support such initiatives. We have also done a lot of work on G20 for economic cooperation and other international organizations. And we believe that this process, on the one hand, can foster some domestic production of health or agriculture, etc. But it should at the same time strengthen a new type of globalization, a better functioning globalization, and also better regional cooperation in the future. And Turkey is ready to do its own part in this process. And EU-Turkey relations, I believe, have been affected positively in this process. We have cooperated, as I said, with many countries at bilateral level. And also, there are things that we have to work together with EU. I can just underline two important challenges for Turkey and EU that we can cooperate with. The first one is economy. Actually, post-pandemic period, we will have economy as #1 priority. Many people have lost their jobs, trade has been affected, tourism has been affected, and we have that will lead to new inequalities, social effects. So we have to cooperate for recovery. And EU has already started to discuss about a new recovery, a green recovery, and there are lots of good discussions at these times. But I believe that all these things will affect us positively as Turkey, because we are trading with Europe, we have capital movements, we have tourism relations, etc. I mean, whatever happens in Europe in a good direction is good for Turkey as well, and vice versa. We have a common interest, actually, between Europe and Turkey in all these processes. And I believe it should not be just a spontaneous positive effect. We should also have more dialogue and cooperation in this process at different levels and with different channels. For example, it is not enough to have government-to-government dialogue. We should also have party-to-party dialogue, parliament-to-parliament dialogue, dialogue between private sectors, civil society, and that will strengthen this policy preparations. Europe, when designing these new programs, should also consider neighborhood policy. As I have emphasized, I mean, without good developments in your neighbors, you cannot have a real health improvement as well as economic improvement. So I believe Europe should have a broader conception of post-pandemic recovery program, and Turkey-EU cooperation dialogue, policy dialogue, can help a lot in this process. And that is the most important challenge, I believe, in the coming weeks and months before us. The second one I would like to emphasize, the last one, there are lots of things to discuss, but I believe the priority is refugee issues. I mean, EU and Turkey has also a big problem of refugee problem, and that is also a health problem as well as economic issue and political issue. We should cooperate more between us to contain this crisis, especially for vulnerable groups within immigrants and refugee communities, like women, like old people, like children, like disabled people. We should increase our humanitarian support to refugee communities and target especially vulnerable groups within this refugee and other disadvantaged groups. And we should also work for root causes of this refugee crisis, which is basically the Syria issue. So Turkey and Europe should work more closely for a political solution to Syrian crisis that will contain this refugee issue and many other repercussions. So in the near future, I hope, in the German presidency in particular, I hope we can have more dialogue with EU at the top level and at different levels, technical levels, and also with different channels, so that we can discuss, for example, the modernization of customs union, the IPA funds, and how to use them more effectively. By the way, I would like to thank Nacho Sanchez for his support in the parliament for IPA funds and their use for Turkey, preparing Turkey for the processes. So I hope this new atmosphere after the COVID pandemic will help us also spill over other areas and have more positive dialogue between Turkey and EU that can support the reform processes in Turkey, that can support Turkey-EU accession process and create benefits for both sides. I don't want to make it too long. There are very distinguished speakers. Probably, maybe after, the questions, we can discuss some specific issues in more detail. I would like to thank you again for this moderation, and also I hope we will continue with similar activities in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Yilmaz, for this very comprehensive answer. There will be certainly time to go into detail in most of the topics that you already mentioned. But before that, we would like to hear from our two other panelists on what has been EU's response to this pandemic and what are the implications that they think it will have for the future of the integration process. We have seen many of the pillars in which the EU is sustained, like, for instance, the open borders and Schengen system. We've also seen how some of the measures taken by some member states have compromised the rule of law in certain countries. We also have Brexit in the horizon, not knowing how the future relationship between the EU and the United Kingdom will be. We also have a discussion on the own resources. So I wanted to start by asking Mr. Sanchez Amor about whether he considers that this is going to be also an opportunity to have a fresh start for the European Union project, and to hear his comments on how the EU has been dealing with the pandemic so far.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Cevdet. Sergey, it's a pleasure always to meet you all. First, I would like to thank this kind invitation to talk. I think it's very wise for the AKP to start that kind of relations publicly, because we met sometimes privately, but I think it's good that the party that it's governing the country could have this public approach to the European Union officials. I would like to thank also the attitude of Turkey government, who sent some health material to Spain in a very difficult period in the beginning of the crisis, in that weeks in which the needs of health material was critical, and we received some donation. That means this is a very smart diplomacy, but especially a humanitarian approach that we do appreciate a lot. About the crisis. Well, first, for our Turkish colleagues attending the meeting, it's very important to know that the European Union has not in any way competencies on the health issues. The competencies are national. In part of our countries are regional or federal, in the federated states. But even not having a legal ground, a clear legal ground to address the health issue, I think the reaction of the European Union was immediate, because we put immediate some figures, some programs to help the countries more affected. Differently than what happened in the previous crisis of the sovereign debt, because at that time we had at least 2 years in which the European Union has to decide how to face that challenge, and now we employ a couple of months. For that reason, the approach of the European Union has been different, probably because finally we recognize the approach based on austerity in the last crisis has been a mistake and has created more problems than solutions. But because we have this approach, because we have this experience how not to deal with that kind of crisis, we, the European Union, reacted immediately and now is committed to react in a field in which there are a lot of competencies, is the recovery. What we call the recovery plan is, as Cevdet said, is the question, what happened after stopping completely the economic activity during these 2 or 3 months. And now the European Union has put on the table an enormous layer of resources and loans and grants, and we are discussing that in the next weeks. And only for that reason, I have to underline that the answer of the European Union has been very different than what happened in the past. But there are some effects in our external relations. And one of these effects is our claim about the needs of having a strategic autonomy. And our reflections on value change means a kind of renationalization, not in the sense of each European state member, but renationalization in the broad European sense. We have to reflect on our autonomous strategic autonomy, and we have to reflect if our value chains are designed to protect Brussels, to protect Europe in that kind of crisis. And that could drive, in some sense, in a kind of recentralization, or to put more effort in our reforms than our external perspectives. And this is a risk, of course, we have to deal with. And one of the key questions is this state of mind in Europe is going to affect the candidate countries or the external relation with the neighborhood in general? And I think we have to, there is a risk of that, and we have to reflect, to make the reflection on that situation, to try to avoid that risk, to be focused on the internal strategic autonomy and forgetting or putting in a second place, in a second step, the relation with the neighborhood, and especially with the candidate countries. Concerning Turkey, this period, first, that period shows clearly that Turkey is a very powerful regional actor, even in that kind of crisis, because what Cevdet said about the aid Turkey sent to 90 countries. And but on the other hand, there is some questions, marks on the action of the Turkish government during the pandemic, and we received, Sergey and myself and the colleague, a lot of complaints about some issues related to the COVID, like what we call, probably Cevdet, he doesn't agree with that depiction, with a selective release of inmates in prisons due to the health system and that kind of thing. But I don't really think, for the moment, this period at that very moment shows a clear shift in the positions. I don't see that for the moment. But there are some news. One news is we are delaying. The Commission decided to delay the report on Turkey till autumn, that probably means that the Parliament, except if we decide to go ahead without the Commission, the report from the Parliament has been postponed de facto till autumn and winter, and this is a fact. Other fact is, in the meantime, we acted in refugees. Sergey and myself and Kati Piri and other officials, we always have been very clear on that. The problem of the refugees is still there, and we have to react. Some programs in the facility are going to end in the next months, and we always ask from the Parliament to the Commission, you have to prepare how to continue the help and try to address the needs and the necessities of the refugees, and has been done for the moment. The Commission reacted and put on the table of the Parliament a budget amendment to refill some programs, not only in Turkey, also in Lebanon and Jordan. But for the rest, I don't see really that the crisis has become a beacon point in the accession process. It's not for the moment. We are having the same worries. We are having the same attitudes. We know very well that Turkey wants to start talking about the custom unions and visa liberalization. I noticed from Cevdet and other officials that you try very smartly to cut in pieces the relation, and some pieces are more transactional pieces, and we have to accept that. But other are, like the accession process is other kind of approach, not transactional. And I understand that the rationale of the Turkish officials trying to put that in pieces. Okay, let's talk about the custom union, and if there is no progress of the accession process, why don't we talk about the custom union or health cooperation and international cooperation? And it's difficult. I always express our difficulties to cut in pieces the relation with Turkey, and everything is mingled, everything is intermixed. The external, the foreign affairs policies of Turkey are affecting the trust. Other policies, on the contrary, are helping to consider Turkey like a very important partner from the health point of view. But I don't see for the moment that the crisis has become a real turning point in the accession process or in the complex of the whole relation between European Union and Turkey. I'm sorry for being so long. We wait for Sergey.
Thank you, Mr. Amor. Now I would like to ask a similar question to Mr. Lagodinsky, but if he could incorporate the upcoming German presidency into the picture and what can be expected from the internal developments of the European Union, but also linking it to a question that we received from the audience, from Aisha directly. What is it to expect from the upcoming German presidency in terms of EU-Turkey relations?
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here. Thank you, Cevdet YILMAZ, and thank you, Laura, as well, and for your great job with the forum. We're looking forward to even more activities together. I don't want to add too much to what have been said. I think that we should understand and remember that we have kind of a two-phase game. The first game was handling and managing the epidemiological crisis, the virus itself. This is something that is now, for the first wave at least, is coming to an end. And then the post epidemic crisis, which is just beginning. And in the first part, the three issues that we had from the European side, but probably from any national side, were the question of coordination, of efficiency, and of solidarity. Those were the three main points where we were tested. I would agree with Nacho in my assessment that though this test was quite critical, and though various regions were also traumatized by and hurt by the crisis in various ways, I think that the role of Brussels and the role of the European Union as a coordination center was actually reinvigorated. The first couple of days, the first maybe a week, where we as a non-federal entity, not even federal entity, was a little bit looking for the role, you know, the Commission was looking what role they should play. This was, of course, a new situation. But after that, even me being critical of many aspects, you know, I'm a representative not of the ruling parties, but even from that perspective, I think that the European Union has done, and the Commission has done a very good job in finding their role in this situation. And this role was coordination, and this role was trying to complement the national roles of health policies of each respective member states. There was a lot of resources invested in research. There was a lot of resources also collected in order to have kind of a reserve for various countries. And the gains that we had in the beginning, when each member state was a little bit disoriented, when they first tried to close the borders, but also to stop exports of important gears and equipment, was stopped very soon, because everyone realized after a while, unfortunately it took some time, that solidarity in this crisis is the important foundation. And therefore, I think we learned a lot from that in the post-crisis, post-epidemiologic crisis phase, which is starting now. And there, the 3 points that will be important will be conditionality, vision, and I would say yet again, solidarity. How we are going to divide responsibility among us, share responsibility, for example, for debt. And the progress that has been done within the past weeks, also with, speaking of Germany, with Merkel's shift towards more openness regarding a solidary way of sharing the burdens, the financial burdens of this post-crisis situation, was, to be honest, looking at it from Germany, was quite astonishing. I think Nacho is absolutely right when he says we learned from the crisis before. And of course we can expect better, but I think the progress that we've seen is already huge. Now the question would be, of course, what conditionality we would like to see, under which conditions those recovery funds should be distributed. Should this be more green or less green? These are the discussions that are taking place on national and European level now. And an important discussion is the conditionality on rule of law. As you know, we had some question marks regarding situation in Hungary, for example, or in Poland, or in other countries. These are not just the two. And this is important for us to say. Recovery and economic growth and economic cooperation and solidarity is the foundation of the European Union. But we also look at our common values, democracy, rule of law, civil rights. This is a precondition for our common goal and common economic development. And these are the questions that we're going to be addressing. And yes, we will never make it out of the crisis without a vision. Because what we're seeing now is a worldwide global shift. Maybe many of us don't understand and don't realize it, but the changes that we're facing now in terms of global financial and global economic system, but also the geopolitical system, are going to be huge. What is happening now with China and the United States is going to affect us and will, of course, put us under pressure to become an international actor. Just very briefly on what you said regarding neighborhood policies. The European Union and ourselves are it is very important for us to emphasize this. During the crisis, at the height of the crisis, the Commission has allocated 3.1 billion euros for our neighborhood programs. for the southern countries, neighbors, and also for eastern neighbors. And this is something that we would like to emphasize also vis-a-vis Turkey, our other neighbors. We will not get out of this crisis, and Cevdet Yilmaz, you are absolutely right, if we only look at ourselves. And we should be watching our neighbors, and we should be watching for ways of how to work on this together. And of course, the customs union, something that I personally, in my capacity, and I know that Nacho is also, I don't want to speak for him, but he's also very open on those projects, at least bringing a customs union on the level that is important for modern standards would be important. But of course, it is also a question of our cooperation on issues like rule of law, like values, and like civil rights. And Nacho Sanchez AMOR has mentioned a lot of issues that we were addressed about the situation on that. What to expect from Germany in the upcoming half a year? I'm not sure that the upcoming 6 months will be 6 months where the relationship between EU and Turkey will be the cornerstone of the presidency. We have to be honest about this. This will be a presidency of a post or still ongoing COVID recovery. And this will dominate this a lot. But I can assure you that me as a German member of European Parliament, we are very insistent that we should not be focusing only on this or that. I do agree that watching our relationship and trying to give a push to our relationship with Turkey would be important, also from the German and European perspective. Let's look at what we could do regarding the working negotiations that are now a little bit stalled, as far as I understand, between the two sides. I think it would be important to find an agreement on many of those issues. And I think that the German presidency will be looking also at issues of civil rights. We have, and you know, Mr. Yilmaz, you know exactly that we have certain concerns on certain issues. What will happen to Kavala after yet another ruling of the European Court of Human Rights, and to many other issues, which of course will be part of the package of this presidency. So we will be working as much as we can in order to reinvigorate the bilateral relations. But this will be, of course, a broader range of issues and not just economic. And I think this is the right way to go, because crises come and crises go. We should have a holistic view of each other and a historic, a kind of visionary historic view of each other, because we belong together. And this is something that I say again, and this is how I want to end. Turkey and Europe belong together, and we need to work hard in order to make this vision true.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lagodinsky. I think from the crucial positions that both of you have in the new European Parliament, I think it's very much appreciated to have a new constructive approach to Turkey. And as I was saying, I think you are holding possibly the most important positions in this new European Parliament. Unfortunately, as Mr. AMOR was saying, the new progress report has been delayed, so the work hasn't really kind of started when it comes to EU-Turkey relations, at least when it has to do with the upcoming report. But your position, Mr. Lagodinsky, as the chair of the Joint Parliamentary Committee to Turkey is also crucial. What Mr. Yilmaz was saying before, we have been lacking a lot of dialogue in recent years. So I think your positions combined can contribute to, in a way, improve remove some of the hurdles that we have been encountering in the past, especially when it comes to the position of the European Parliament. I wanted to ask you, first both of you, and then give the word to Mr. Yilmaz to react from a Turkish perspective on what do you consider are the main stumbling blocks in our relations at the moment, and from your respective parliamentary positions, how do you envision to move forward in some of these? And Mr. Yilmaz also mentioned two key ones, which would be economic cooperation, as well as cooperation when it comes to the refugee issue. Yesterday, the Commission announced a new package of support to refugees in Turkey, which both of you welcomed in a statement. But what else needs to be done in order to move forward with this deal? How has it changed the relationship? And what can be done in order to mend the different perspectives that the two sides have on this deal? I would start with Mr. Amor.
Conmigo, Laura? Okay, thank you. Well, you have to be aware of the lack of improvements in the atmosphere in the parliament related to Turkey. Because I always say to my Turkish colleague, the news, a member of the European Parliament not directly related to foreign affairs, the news they receive from Turkey always are critical things. The drillings, Libya, Syria, the approach to Russia, the threats on the refugees, everything that a regular member of the parliament, not directly related to Turkey, not having the clues, is always bad news and always bad impressions. And I remember how my assistant asked me when we received the news that the report is going to be postponed. Our dilemma is, this is good for the report. Are the things improving in the next 5 or 6 months? Or on the contrary, are worsening, and then the report is going to be drafted in a worse environment, in a worse atmosphere? And we have to be aware of that. You know that we had to deal, I think Lagodinsky and myself, with an amendment on the discharge of the budget. It's a procedure on budget, in which there was some colleagues asked to simply cut till zero the IPA funding to Turkey. No more €1 to Turkey, because there is that narrative in which there is always a gift to Erdogan. This is a kind of psychological approach, not very easy to deal with here in the parliament. If you agreed anything related to Turkey, you are sending a political gift to President Erdogan. And after that narrative, we have to counteract, explaining very carefully about IPA funding, about how the civil society is receiving. The same with the refugees. The money is to the refugees, it's for the refugees' needs, it's not for the Turkish treasury. We always have to counteract, because the immediate reaction, a kind of Pavlovian reaction in the European Parliament, is if you are agreeing anything with Turkey, this is a political gift to President Erdogan. This is the atmosphere, and you, all the people from Turkey that are listening that chat, you have to be aware of that. It's not easy to Lagodinsky or myself or Kathy or others try to introduce some neutrality, some objective views, because it is the atmosphere is very bad. The first question then is to recreate the trust, and we have to do. And for example, Lagodinsky and myself and others, we always publicly praise Turkey on refugees, and we always publicly asked for the renewal of the facility and to send more money. And at the same time, Lagodinsky and Kathy and myself and Peters and other colleagues, we have been very critical with some issues related to civil liberties in Turkey. We are doing plainly, publicly with you in our private conversations, also saying that we need some improvements in that portfolio to try to create a different atmosphere in the European Parliament, and the same in the European Commission. The economic cooperation is always welcome, But the question is, are we cooperating with Turkey irrespectively of the condition of being a candidate country? Are we dealing with Turkey the same way we are dealing with, I don't know, Kazakhstan or Russia? And I think it's not possible to us, because the accession process creates a frame, and that frame is greasy with trust. And we do need trust if we want that the European institutions act more objectively towards Turkey. And we have to be clear in our criticism. We have to be the same clear in our praising of any other issue that we have to. The political cooperation and the opening, hypothetical opening of the custom unions reshuffling. We are quarreling in the World Trade Association just now. We have open procedures against each other in the World Trade Association. And I always warn my Turkish colleagues, don't try to create difficulties in the custom unions frame as it is, to try to push the discussion to a new frame on custom unions. We have to be loyal to our respective commitments. We have a custom unions, currently we have custom unions agreement, and we have problems in the actual frame of the custom union, and we have to solve that problem to create the trust to advance to another revamp or update of the custom union. This is very important. But for the moment, we are quarreling in the World Trade Association. We feel that there are some irritants. There are some Turkish measures on trade, very technical. It's not easy to explain in that kind of conversation, but we perceive some measures irritants, what we call irritants in the trade field. For that reason, I always come back to the same idea. We have to regain trust. We have to reshape not the custom union. First, we have to regain trust, because if we feel that this narrative of the double standards, of the threat or to use the refugees against Europe or towards Europe, this doesn't create the level play field to judge the relation with Turkey as has to be judges with some objectivity. And these are the preconditions to start talking on any other particular folder. This is my view.
Thank you, Mr. Amor. Now I give the floor to Mr. Lagodinsky. You're muted. We cannot hear you.
I didn't want to disrupt my colleagues. There is not much I could add, because I fully agree with my colleague, Nacho. I would say the three stumbling stones that I saw during the past months were, on the one hand, kind of rooted in the political culture that is clashing, and we should be both sides should be aware of it. It's about rhetorics. It's about mutual respect, and mutual respect that can be very easily endangered by certain words and expressions that are maybe even not meant this way. And a little bit too much of a transactional approach, what Nacho Sanchez Amor said. You know, European Union understands itself, and of course we have our interests, and of course we have you know, economic interests, and many people project on Germany, you know, that they want to dominate, etc., etc. But still, there is a certain culture and self-understanding which is driven by values and by style and by tone. And it is very, I must say personally, it does hurt someone who is so enthusiastic about our bilateral relations to see how, for example, the refugee situation on the border between Turkey and Greece was managed to exert certain pressure and exercise certain pressure. It's not the way how we would like and we should work with each other. And of course, we have to do our homework, but maybe there are other ways of communicating this. So this is one part, and the other part, we need to build also and to work, and we're doing this on our side, away from the, again, culturalist approach to Turkey from the European side. And what Nacho Sanchez AMOR said is true, because there are many people in the European Union and in the Parliament who wouldn't like to see Turkey being part of Europe for very wrong reasons. And so we want to prevent this way of pushing Turkey away, and instead find a way of getting us together. And issues like rule of law and civil rights are not issues that are out of nowhere. They are real, and we have to work on that. And if we do, then I think we have really good chances of advancing on this road. At least I for myself, but also knowing Nacho Sanchez AMOR now, after a month of co-working, we will do our best, really our best, to passionately fight for this common future if we find this way together from both sides.
Thank you for the enthusiasm. I know Mr. Lagodinsky has to leave at 2 o'clock sharp, for sure. I don't know about Nacho, but I would like to give...
the same, we have the same commission, AFET committee.
But the final words are for Mr. Yilmaz, so the floor is yours.
I will try to be as brief as possible. Thank you so much. Actually, I would like to emphasize the vision issue that has been raised by Sergey. I do completely agree that this vision is very critical. I mean, it is also critical for EU-Turkey relations. For example, the enlargement. What is the vision of Europe for next decade or beyond for enlargement? I mean, that should be clarified within Europe, of course. And there should be some discussion about this. And Turkey should be in this context. I would also like to emphasize that progressive politicians in Europe should not be somehow in the same position as extreme right or exclusionary policies. You have underlined this culturalist approach, and Nacho Sanchez also emphasized this somehow exclusionary approach towards Turkey based on certain prejudices. Of course, Turkey, like any other country, we have things to be criticized, and I do completely agree with Nacho Sanchez that there should be objective assessment of situation of every country in the accession process, and we don't have any objection to this. But if we should commonly together, we should also face the reality that there is some xenophobic, anti-Semitic, Islamophobic, etc. I mean, populist atmosphere in Europe, and unfortunately, EU parliamentary elections have been done within this atmosphere of Brexit and other populist discussions. So we have a challenging atmosphere. I am aware of that, but there are things to be done. We have to increase this interparliamentary dialogue, and I believe it shouldn't be just one way. I mean, Turkish parliamentarians going to Brussels. It should also be the other way around. I mean, we should have more visitors from Brussels to Turkey, and that will help a lot to close the gap between the image and reality, actually. Of course, there are things that to be criticized, as I said, like any other country. And also, we should also underline the fact that Turkey has gone through very difficult times, actually, in terms of security challenges. I mean, we have to deal with 3 important terrorist organizations: Daesh, ISIL, PKK, PYD, and FETÖ. And also we had Syria. Now we have 3.6 million refugees, and these are realities. Of course, our relations should not be transactional. It should have transactional elements as well as values. And I believe that between EU and Turkey, we have common interests as well as common values. No question about this. sometimes we may have different interpretations of these values. We may have discussions about the border lines or demarcation lines between security and freedoms, etc. I mean, these discussions can go on, but there is no question that Turkey will increase its democratic standards. Turkey will strengthen its rule of law, and we have already prepared some reform programs for this. And by the way, these are not for EU, for any other organization. These are for Turkish people, for ourselves, for our children. So there is no other way than stronger democracy and rule of law in Turkey. But we also have to be realistic that Turkey has gone through very critical security challenges. I mean, 15 July coup d'etat attempt, the Syria issue, terrorist organizations, etc., etc. You know the history. So we have to be very careful. But I can say that security challenges are decreasing for Turkey, and that is good news, actually. They are not gone 100%, of course, but the security challenges are decreasing, and economy is becoming the #1 agenda for Turkey. And I believe this is good for reforms as well. And if we can have a positive agenda between Turkey and EU, that will also motivate these reforms in Turkey. Before politics, I was General Director responsible for EU affairs, actually, in our bureaucracy. So I know the very positive effect of EU to Turkey in our reform processes. And I believe we can have this, we have this past experience, and we have to discuss how to go forward in this positive direction. And there will always be some issues to be debated. But I don't want to go into the details in this short period of time. What is important as a final word is to keep this dialogue open and to have more real discussion rather than prejudices or impressions or some media coverages. We have to have this direct communication between different actors in different areas. And I believe that is good for Europe, that is good for Turkey, and that is good for everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to all the panelists. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, but I think two of the main issues that come out from this discussion, the first one is that this sets the basis for the constructive discussions that are more needed at the time. And I think regaining trust and setting up a vision are the goals that we should be aiming for in the coming years. Unfortunately, we had very interesting questions in the chat regarding foreign policy, and one of them coming from the ambassador to Belgium, Hassan Ulusoy. We're sorry we couldn't address those, but we hope that we will be having an opportunity to do so in the future. We also received encouraging comments to continue discussing in this format. So we really thank you all, the three panelists, and on behalf of the Turkey Forum, we can also say that we look forward to continuing engaging in this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Cevdet, Sergey, and colleagues. It's a real pleasure. Whenever you wanted another session, we are ready.
Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward, as Cevdet Yilmaz said, for our joint session of our parliamentary committee. We're really looking forward to that.
Thank you all.
All right.